Welcome to the Simply Trade podcast, another news roundup. Today is Monday the 20th, which is also Inauguration Day. So kind of a historic day as Donald Trump is sworn in for his second term, presidential term. But that's not the only thing that's going on today. It's also Martin Luther King Day. So it's an even more special day today, right? Kind of crazy how these two things fall on the same day. Not sure if it'll be the same message, but we'll see where we're going, right? We don't really know what will happen today. I mean, it's early in the morning when this episode comes out. And we're obviously recording this ahead of time. So this episode, another very special episode, as last week we spoke with Kim Campbell about the implications for Canada. And today we're shifting a little bit, focused on south of the border, and we're going to Mexico. And I'm really excited because we have someone that has never been on our podcast. Is it George or do you say Jorge? Because I know...
Typically, they call me Jorge, but
Jorge. Okay, I'm okay with that. I actually have. I mean, we live right here at the border, so I'm familiar with those names. So Jorge Torres, who's a president of Interlink Trade Services and a U.S. customs broker, who recently had a presentation and on what's happening in Mexico and what will happen with the U.S.-Mexican relationship. And there's an article about it, which we read and we're like, oh my God, we need this guy on the podcast to talk on this, right? This is the perfect timing. So thank you so much for coming on. And do you want to share a little bit about yourself and, what you do, just to give a little background?
Yes, thank you, Anika. Good afternoon, all. My name is Jorge Torres. I'm president of Interlink Trade Services. I'm a licensed U.S. customs broker. We provide import-export customs brokerage services, cross-border mainly. We focus mainly on the maquiladora EMEX industry in the automotive, medical devices, metals, furniture, telecommunications, just to name a few. We are located in McAllen, Texas, which is the border with Reynosa, Mexico. I know you're in El Paso, so it's a similar border with Juarez. We actually do customs clearance for our customers in all ports of entry, including air and ocean. I've been a licensed broker since 1995, and I've been with Interlink. This is our 20-year anniversary, 2005 to 2025, so we're very excited about 2025. It's going to be a year full of challenges, so we'll see what happens, but I'm very happy and honored to be here with you.
Yeah, thank you. And you brought it right up. You said challenges. I think that's the word that's going to lead us right into the first part of this. So, with upcoming tariffs, possibly we don't know what will happen. It seems like Mexico is really on the radar for President-elect Trump still at this time. How do you see this affecting day-to-day operations for those kind of businesses, as well as your business, right? Because you said you're dealing with a lot of mechanical stuff, right? I mean, they said that was going to be affected, one of the really hard affected areas, correct?
Yes, well, the maquiladora industry, which is the assembly manufacturing facilities located in Mexico, that export product to the U.S., obviously, they import a lot of raw material into Mexico, and then they manufacture or assemble products that are mainly exported to the U.S. So adding tariffs to those products will have a big impact. And obviously, we'll have an impact on the cross-border operations as well. So we're really monitoring that carefully.
And if this was coming into place, how do you think your operations might change? Like, is there a different approach to your operations? Will you have to hold a little bit back, or what is the process like?
Well, right now, if the tariffs come and are applicable to Mexico, we probably will see a slowdown in operations because companies might not want to export product to the U.S. because of the higher tariffs until they get things ironed out with their customers and suppliers. So we might see a slowdown in operations, at least temporarily, until things are adjusted. Also, obviously, there are major financial impacts once companies are importing to the U.S. obviously the tariffs will increase liabilities with U.S. Customs. So, from a financial standpoint, our industry, custom brokerage industry, will have to be careful and work with the customers, with the importers, to ensure that there are no cash flow issues, no financial implications that can put custom brokerage businesses in jeopardy and also importer businesses in jeopardy.
Yeah, and I see in the article you highlighted some strategies such as leveraging FTAs and using programs like 9801 and 19802. I'm not sure how you would pronounce that.
Obviously, when we mention free trade agreements, since we don't know exactly how the tariffs will be implemented, I mean, there are a lot of opinions and commentaries about how they're going to be implemented. We still see that some countries that have free trade agreements with the United States might be okay. So using those products from those countries will be beneficial. And we also have provisions within the Harmonized Tariff Code of the United States, the Harmonized Tariff Classification System, that allow in the Chapter 98 provisions, which is 9802, U.S. components assembled abroad, or 9801, goods returned to the U.S. without being advanced or improving condition. Those two Chapter 98 provisions allow for duty-free importation, either partial or 100%. So those programs can alleviate or reduce the financial impact of the tariffs.
Which could be really helpful.
But that's pretty much what they are.
Yeah. And, when we talk about these tariffs, like there's clearly not just one motivation behind these tariffs, right? So politically, there is a huge impact on trade, right? But politics is not just all about trade. I mean, they're thinking about economic factors, right? Or non-economic factors such as drug trafficking, human trafficking. What else is there? There's so many things that U.S. politicians have problems with in Mexico. So how do you deal with that? Because clearly the trade industry, while there's tariffs and stuff, but that's not the only motivation to hire these tariffs. There's clearly other motivations behind that, and that the trade industry has really no impact on. So if that's not getting fixed, and if the tariffs are coming, how are businesses going to deal? Do you think some businesses will have to go out of business, or what is the impact on that extent if these tariffs are coming and they're coming to stay for a while?
Yeah, like you mentioned, I mean, these tariffs are for political purposes. And there are two main reasons why President-elect Trump wants to implement these tariffs. Obviously, one is national security, for immigration controls, drug trafficking. And the other one is for an economics policy standpoint, which is promote U.S. domestic industry production and reduce dependence on imported products. So he's using this as a leverage to negotiate mainly with Mexico, the national security side of things, reduce immigration and drug trafficking. He did it back when he was in his first term, and he actually implemented some of that for China, for protecting, for other purposes. There are political in some ways, which is protecting the intellectual property rights, etc. So that it's political mainly, and he's using this as a leverage. Now, unfortunately, if these are implemented, obviously, the argument that he has had in the past and currently is that the exporting country is the party that pays these tariffs. Well, not necessarily. I think the consensus is that at the end of the day, the consumer is the one that pays these tariffs, because obviously, if they're assessed, obviously the importers will have to pass that along to their customers and the consumers. So this might create an inflationary situation again, which will have an economic impact in the U.S.
Yeah, it's the same thing we said with Canada. I mean, Canada has like these contra tariffs that they put on, and they do like the same thing on their side, and it just creates And this is where we get to another thing, a trade war, right? So how likely do you think a trade war would happen between Mexico and Canada? Not Canada, sorry. Mexico and the U.S.?
Well, President Claudia Sheinbaum has mentioned a few times lately that if these tariffs are implemented, that they might also implement tariffs on U.S. products. So obviously that will create what we call a trade war. It's not, trade wars are not good for anyone. So
yeah, the consumers, like one thing they want to do here, what people are really discussing is that they want lower prices because the inflation, I mean, the prices have just been higher than they ever were, right? I mean, I see it going down a little bit, it's just whatever, what people are saying right now. And I think it's so funny because when we talk about tariffs, we need to really look at the bigger picture. And exactly what you just mentioned is that it's going to come right down to consumers and we're going to pay more. I mean, I don't understand. It's really hard for me to understand that people are voting for this and want this, right? But when we look beyond that, it's the consumer that's going to pay the price. So it's kind of sad.
Yes. I mean, obviously, it can be shared. I mean, exporter producers might lower their pricing. Importers might reduce their profit margins so that the impact to the end consumer is as minimal as possible. But at the end of the day, everyone loses. I mean, and at the end of the day, prices are going to increase regardless.
Yeah. I just remembered when you brought up Scheinbaum, I think that's her name. She has a very German last name. And I'm German, so I'm like, I try to say it my way, but I'm like, that's not how you would say it over there. She had a funny response to a recent comment that President-elect has made about the Gulf of and she said, let's call America Mexicana or something like that. And it was so funny.
Yeah.
I thought that was funny of her, but it's comedy a little bit. I think we have to laugh at politics a little. It makes things easier to deal with, as hard as it is already, right? So we want to put a little bit of light in there. I always say, I mean, whatever side you're on, right? You have to make light of things. All right. Well, you also mentioned, this is funny, you mentioned the concept of globalization 2.0. I don't know. Can you go a little bit into that? What like your thoughts are on that?
Yes, actually, well, as you've seen in the past, the word globalization mean all countries trading and getting into free trade agreements. So everyone's happy, everyone's growing. That's more of a neoliberal type of position that has happened before with President Clinton signing NAFTA and other government officials, getting into free trade agreements. But lately, we've seen more of a regionalization of trade blocks. Like USMCA, for example, we have North America, Canada, US, Mexico. So the idea of a free trade agreement or a trade agreement like USMCA is to create a trading bloc among the three countries. So we're seeing that regions are becoming more critical for the supply chain. And we learned our big lesson during the pandemic because the reliance that the U.S. had with Asia, mainly China, for goods, all kinds of goods, particularly drug, medical devices, with the pandemic and the supply chain disruptions, we saw how weak we were regarding having the proper goods that we needed in the U.S. So that obviously creates a different mentality where, hey, yes, we can source globally, but we have to think regionally and be able to react to supply chain disruptions such as pandemics, climate situations, geopolitical wars, etc. So that way we don't get into a situation that we don't have the supplies or the needs of goods that we require to sustain our economy. So that's where globalization 2.0 comes into play. That yes, we can still source globally, but we need to think more from a regional standpoint and create those supply chains regionally.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm not like that's what I kind of, when I hear nearshoring, I kind of think of globalization 2.0. I don't know. Nearshoring was a really big word in 2024. It's become, how do you feel about nearshoring?
Well, nearshoring is basically, it has been happening for many, many years. I mean, when NAFTA was implemented, a lot of growth, a lot of companies set up operations in Mexico mainly to take advantage of the rules of origin and the trade agreement. So that kind of created a wave of nearshoring, meaning, okay, nearshoring is producing goods close to your customers. Obviously, there are a lot of variations, friendshoring, etc. But nearshoring is pretty much that. Now, that obviously the concept picked up with the pandemic because of the regions, making sure that you're producing in the region.
Especially because of China. I think like once the whole China situation kicked off and it kind of escalated, people were like, okay, nearshoring is like what you need to kind of be looking in, because you don't want to, you kind of want to trickle down your business with China.
Yes, that's exactly right. I mean, it's mainly, we started seeing that Mexico was the country that was going to benefit with nearshoring. We still see that's going to happen, maybe at a slower pace than initially was thought, because Mexico has their own issues too. The new government has, not come forward with good plans to attract more industry. There's a lot of things that need to be done in infrastructure, investments, security issues, and also with the laws and regulations. I mean, they have been changing in Mexico the laws and regulations a lot. I'm not going to get into the details; they can get technical, but that's putting a little bit of a stop of investments. There are investments coming into Mexico. Don't get me wrong, but at a slower pace than we initially thought, and it's because of all the dynamics that we have now.
Yeah, it is multifaceted. When we think of trade, we're just like talking imports and exports, and then you get deep down and it's like, oh my God, there's so much things you have to consider. And then you want to go one route, and then that doesn't happen because of certain other issues that are not really trade related, And I do want to ask you one more thing about USMCA, because I know it will be under review in 2026. Where do you see that going, or do you have any hopes for it? Or because I know Claudia Sheinbaum, she already said that she wants to maintain it, kind of, and nourish it, right? Not sure what Trump said about it. But looking at how the relationship looks right now and what his initial needs are or wants are, I'm not sure where this will go, but what are your hopes for it, or what do you want to see out of it?
Well, USMCA was, passed or, put into place or developed when Trump was in office. So he thought that NAFTA was a horrible free trade agreement. So they got rid of NAFTA and they came up with USMCA. So it's within his first term that this was done. Now they put the sunset provision, which now we're seeing the first review in 2026. Obviously, we all expect that it's going to continue. I think there's a big opportunity for regionalization, globalization 2.0 to continue, because we need trade agreements such as USMCA for that to happen. It's not going to be easy because right now he's setting the tone with this proposed tariffs and all these demands that he's making. So he's going to use USMCA as a leverage to get what he wants. So Mexico and Canada have to be real smart and bring top-notch people to the negotiating table to be able to negotiate with the Trump administration to ensure that USMCA can continue. I mean, there are concerns, but we do see that regardless, all the three countries need each other. So
Yeah. I love that you said that. I agree with that. I mean, everyone, here, you hear it a lot, is like, oh, America is the greatest country and, biggest economy and whatnot. But I always think it's like all countries together do that to create such countries, right? That country would never be able to establish that really on their own. I mean, especially if you see Canada, Mexico, and the United States, you just recently saw it with the disaster that is happening still, or is trickling down now in California. Mexico came to help, Canada came to help. I mean, that's kind of what we want out of this relationship, I feel like. And I hope it sets the tone to what is to come, because I feel like that's how all countries can grow to, unite and come together. And I know there will be struggles, but you can't do it by letting your other countries down, or letting your consumers or whatever down. You really want everyone to succeed, even when that's hard. But I mean, we kind of touched on everything that you were saying, but for the last part, do you have any like notes for people, or just what to watch out for, or what maybe to look into, or how to prepare? Do you have any like last words to that?
Yes. Well, unfortunately, January 20th is going to come Monday.
It'll be here today, so they'll be listening today. Yeah.
I'm not saying unfortunately about the date, but we don't know exactly what's going to happen with the tariffs, and specifically talking about tariffs. So I wish we had something magical to read to see what's going to happen. But what we've been telling companies is just to work on the issues that we touched on that article. Mitigation, mitigating the risk, the financial impacts. Also look at the different sourcing options, negotiate pricing with your suppliers, with your customers, so that everyone can, spread out whatever cost increments we're going to have. We're hoping that if these tariffs are implemented, they're going to be temporary. Because I know they're going to work things out eventually, sooner than later. Also, they might not be, fully implemented initially. There might be a gradual implementation, certain percentages, monthly or weekly, gradually. And also, it might be only strategic products. They're going to do a more, by commodities. It's not going to be a general tariff. So, I mean, there are a lot of things that can happen. We won't know until after January 20th.
I know. So frustrating.
That's been, pretty intense, because companies don't like uncertainty, because we need to make plans for investments, etc. But like I said, there are companies investing in Mexico right now, even with this. Like Volvo is opening a truck plant in Nuevo León. Amazon is opening a data center in Querétaro. Train is expanding in Mexico. So there are a lot of companies doing expansions and new investments in Mexico. So that gives us a signal that regardless of what happens, trade is going to continue. How that's going to play out as far as tariffs, we still don't know. We've been here before. We dealt with Section 301. We dealt with Section 232 on steel and aluminum. So, companies are resilient, and they're able to work out things with good advice, good planning. So we're just hoping, be ready for the worst and hope for the best.
Yeah. When you mentioned that companies are still making investments and stuff, it makes me think like these companies, really big companies, might have some intel. I don't know. I'm just really overthinking, and I'm like, maybe they know something other people don't, and it is going the opposite. And it's just like to scare companies and to make sure everyone is really on top of their game. Has all their statements and is doing legal work, as with the borders that we have here. And maybe it's gonna be in favor for companies. Who knows? Like, we don't know, right? But that could be something that could happen. I'm very open to it. I feel like when we talk, I'm not sure if you've heard about that, but it was the ILA and the automation thing at the, he kind of, President-elect Trump was like, oh, I don't want automation. And we totally thought that he was going to side with automation. So it's like what can we expect? He can make it 360, we don't know. And I kind of find it fascinating, and I'm excited just because the unknown is a little bit exciting. Of course, there's a lot of uncertainties, and for businesses it's scary, but I really like that you mentioned clear communication in your article, like having clear communication across all levels. And I think that's going to make things a lot easier for you and other businesses.
Yeah, that is correct. Now more than ever, being trade experts, trade consultants, custom brokers, advisors, now more than ever, communication is key because things are changing, evolving daily, even hourly. So communicating with the top and down, sideways, it's critical. Information is so valuable right now to make decisions and to change strategies that we need to have that communication flow. Another thing is that obviously our industry is to interpret and implement laws and regulations. So whatever is given to us, we'll have to work out, understand them, implement them, monitor them, and work with our customers to make sure that they're in compliance. But now we have to add the political factor. Sometimes we all want to be neutral and apolitical, but we cannot continue like that. We need to add politics into the trade industry and understand the dynamics of politics and how they can impact our industry. And that's a perfect example is what's going on right now. I mean, we have to monitor the political side of Trump and Mexico and Canada, because that's moving the pendulum for trade in our region. Now, as far as trade is going to continue and it's going to grow. Okay, as long as we have consumption, there's going to be trade. So all these things that are happening is just obstacles, but we do see that trade is going to continue to grow. Investments are going to continue. They can slow down at some points, but we're going to see that. So all we have to do is make sure that communication, monitor things, and adapt to change.
Well, thank you so much. That was such a great way to end it. I think that'll be helpful to a lot of our listeners who are definitely feeling this uncertainty right now. I feel like this podcast is a little bit of a light bulb and giving the intel into things and just opening the eye a little bit wider than just what's in front of you. So I thank you for coming on, and hopefully we'll talk again, once everything is hitting the fan, maybe we'll see what happens, and you can come on and maybe share your perspective on how you're dealing with, whatever the change is, or, if there's no change, then we probably won't see you again. But who knows, right? We don't know. So again, I want to thank our listeners for tuning in, and whether you're listening in the morning, whether you're listening after inauguration or one day after, we don't know what's going to happen. And we'll definitely probably have an emergency episode on after inauguration, depending on if there's anything, because he did say on day one, this will happen. Day one is January 20th. So we will see. And please subscribe, watch us on YouTube, follow us on LinkedIn. You can also, you can really listen to our episodes anywhere you listen to podcasts, also Podbean. And that will be it. So we'll see you back Monday unless there's an emergency episode. And yeah, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest in the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading.